Sarah awoke to an unsettling stillness. The kind that settles deep in the bones and whispers that something is terribly wrong. The sheets beside her were cold, untouched, as if Vincent had never laid there at all. The silence was deafening. No hum of the coffee machine. No rhythmic sound of his breath as he stretched by the window. A prickling unease slithered up her spine as she slid out of bed. Bare feet meeting the hardwood floor with a muted thud. The house, once brimming with warmth, now felt sterile, abandoned. She moved through the space with growing dread, her pulse thrumming against her ribs. Drawers hung open, hollow and ransacked. The closet gaped, stripped bare. Even their framed photographs, smiling, frozen in time, had vanished. Her breath a single note on the counter. Crisp and deliberate. The W, enjoy your new year with your new man. Their love had always been a wildfire, consuming, untamed, and impossible to ignore. From the moment Sarah and Vincent met, there had been a magnetic pull between them, a gravity neither could escape. It wasn't just attraction, it was something primal, an electric charge humming beneath every glance, every accidental touch. In the beginning, their nights were feverish, bodies tangled in silken sheets, their whispered confessions lost in the haze of passion. Vincent knew her, knew the precise way to unravel her, to make her gasp, to turn her body into a canvas of desire. And Sarah? She had never felt safer than when she was burning for him. But passion alone was never enough to sustain a marriage, and somewhere along the way, their fire dimmed, buried beneath the weight of routine, long work hours, and unspoken frustrations. Their moments of intimacy, once urgent and frequent, became sparse, measured, as though they were rationing affection. Vincent still touched her, still kissed her, but the hunger had faded, replaced by something softer, more familiar. She told herself it was normal. That love matured, but deep down, she craved the reckless abandon they had once shared. That craving, that ache for something wild and unfiltered, was what made her reckless. It was what made her lean too close to Bradley, laugh too freely at his jokes, let the heat of his gaze linger just a second too long. It was what made her forget, for one dangerous moment, that some fires are meant to burn out. Bradley was the kind of man who commanded a room without uttering a word. His presence alone was enough to shift the air, drawing attention effortlessly, as if gravity itself bent in his favor. He was confident, polished, the kind of leader who never second-guessed himself, and he had noticed Sarah from the moment she walked into his office. At first, she kept a careful distance, reminding herself that she was a professional, a married woman, but the late nights stretched longer. The deadlines tightened, and somewhere in the quiet hours between conference calls and strategy meetings, the lines began to blur. Bradley was intoxicating in ways she hadn't anticipated. His voice, low and deliberate, lingered in her mind long after she left the office. His gaze held steady, never wavering, never apologetic. Unlike Vincent, who had grown accustomed to her presence, Bradley made her feel seen. He had a way of speaking that made every word feel like an invitation. Every small gesture laced with something unspoken. And the worst part? She liked it. It started innocently enough, a shared joke, a lingering glance, his hand resting just a second too long on the small of her back as he leaned over to point something out on her laptop. But with every fleeting touch, every stolen moment, she felt something stir inside her, something restless and reckless. It wasn't love, not even lust, at least not yet. It was the thrill of knowing that, in another life, she might let herself fall. Number 4. Write more smoothly and creatively. ChatGPT.noi. The night pulsed with energy, glasses clinking, laughter spilling through the air, the hum of conversation rising and falling like waves. The company's annual New Year's Eve party had turned into something more decadent, more indulgent. Champagne flowed freely, gilding the room in a haze of warmth, and Sarah let herself sink into it, let the bubbles fizz on her tongue as she tipped back another glass. She told herself she deserved this, a night to let go, to forget the exhaustion, the guilt, the growing distance between her and Vincent. Bradley was beside her, relaxed, magnetic, his presence coiling around her like smoke. She could feel the weight of his gaze even when she wasn't looking. She leaned into the moment, into the recklessness, laughing too loudly at his jokes, meeting his touch with no hesitation. There was something dangerous about the way he stood too close, how his fingertips brushed the inside of her wrist as he handed her another drink. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8, the room pulsed with anticipation. 7, 6, 5. Sarah turned to Bradley, her pulse fluttering like a trapped bird. 4, 3, 2, 1. Then his lips were on hers. Heat flared through her body, her breath catching as she melted into the kiss, reckless, intoxicating, irreversible, and just as the fireworks erupted outside, she pulled back, her vision swimming, and met Vincent's eyes across the room. He had seen everything. Sarah woke to a pounding in her skull, the kind of headache that felt like a cruel punishment for the night before. The taste of last night's champagne still clung to her tongue, bitter now, no longer the sweet indulgence it had been hours ago. She groaned, forcing herself upright, but something felt off. The bed was too cold, the sheets untouched on Vincent's side. Her heart began to race. She swung her legs over the edge, her bare feet pressing against the chilled floor as she stumbled toward the door. The house was silent, too silent. No soft murmurs of Vincent brewing coffee. No sound of his morning routine. The unease in her stomach sharpened. And then she saw it. The drawers, left ajar, empty. The closet, hollow, stripped of his presence. The framed photographs that had once captured their happiest moments were gone. As if someone had carefully erased every trace of him from their life. A sharp, breathless panic gripped her chest. Sarah rushed to the kitchen, her fingers fumbling for her phone, dialing his number with trembling hands. Straight to voicemail. Again, nothing. She tried his email, no response. Then, her eyes landed on the counter. A single note, crisp and deliberate, sat waiting for her. Enjoy your new year with your new man. The words slammed into her like a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. Vincent hadn't just left, he had vanished. The loneliness pressed in like a second skin. Days blurred into nights, weeks stretched into months, and Vincent remained a ghost, silent, unreachable, gone. Sarah searched for him in the places they once shared, in the corners of memories that still smelled like him. But he had erased himself with meticulous precision. No phone calls, no cryptic messages, not even the anger she had braced herself for. Just a void where her husband used to be. And yet, Bradley was there, always, a steady presence in the absence Vincent had left behind. He didn't ask questions, he didn't judge, he simply lingered, offering comfort in the form of late-night conversations, expensive whiskey, and the kind of company that didn't demand explanations. One evening, after too much wine, Sarah let herself lean into him. She let his hands find her waist. His lips trace the delicate skin of her throat. She told herself it was just a distraction, a moment to feel something other than regret. But when his mouth claimed hers, when his fingers pushed beneath the hem of her dress, she didn't stop him. The night unfolded in a feverish blur, sheets tangled, breaths stolen, bodies pressed together in a desperate search for something neither of them could name. And for a few blissful, reckless hours, Sarah let herself drown in him, in the pleasure, in the illusion that she wasn't falling apart. But in the morning, as the sun bled through the curtains, she knew, this wasn't love, this was a mistake. Sarah wasn't prepared for Vincent's return. It happened without warning, no call, no message, just the sudden presence of him, standing in their living room like a storm waiting to break. She froze, wine glass in hand, her breath lodging in her throat. He was different now. The man before her wasn't the Vincent she had known, the man who had once held her so fiercely. Whispered love against her skin in the quiet of night. This Vincent was colder, sharper, unforgiving. He tossed a thick envelope onto the table. Divorce papers. Sarah's stomach lurched. Vincent, wait. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just something jagged, something bitter. Did you even look for me, Sarah? His voice was calm, But it was the kind of calm that preceded a storm. Or were you too busy keeping Bradley warm in my absence? The words sliced through her, leaving behind nothing but raw, open wounds. She swallowed hard. It wasn't like that. Vincent tilted his head, eyes dark with something unreadable. Then he stepped closer, so close she could smell the salt of the ocean still clinging to his skin. I want nothing from you, he murmured, except distance. Sarah reached for him, desperate, aching, but he stepped back. And in that moment, she knew. She had lost him, completely, irrevocably. And the worst part? She had no one to blame but herself. The air between them was electric, charged with something volatile, anger, lust, grief, maybe all three. Vincent shouldn't have been here. He should have walked away, let the past crumble behind him. But here he was, standing in the dim glow of the kitchen, his eyes locked on Sarah's, dark with something unspoken. Neither of them moved. Then suddenly, he was on her. His hands gripped her waist, fingers digging into her skin as he pushed her against the counter. His mouth found hers, rough, demanding, punishing. It wasn't love, it was war. And Sarah welcomed it, wrapped herself in the storm, kissed him back with the same desperate hunger. Clothes fell away in frantic movements, bodies pressing together like they had been starving for this moment, for each other. His lips traced a path down her throat, his breath hot against her skin. Every kiss, every touch was a reckoning, a reminder of what she had lost. When he lifted her onto the counter, spreading her thighs apart, she gasped, nails raking across his back, pulling him closer. It was raw, fierce, a final goodbye disguised as pleasure. And then it was over. Vincent stepped back, breath ragged, eyes unreadable. He grabbed his shirt, pulling it on without looking at her. That's it? Sarah whispered, voice barely audible. Vincent exhaled, his jaw tightening. That's all that's left. And just like that, he walked away. Number 9. Write more smoothly and creatively. ChatGPT.noi. The past belonged to Sarah, but the future belonged to Vincent. He left the city without looking back. The weight of betrayal finally lifted from his shoulders. Florida welcomed him like a long-lost friend, warm, endless skies, the scent of salt and citrus in the air. He found a home by the water. Something simple, unburdened by ghosts. The rhythm of the waves became his new silence. One that didn't haunt, but healed. Max and Luna, his 2 German shepherds, became his constant shadows. Their loyalty a quiet reminder that trust, once broken, could still exist elsewhere. He ran with them at dawn, letting the burn in his muscles replace the ache Sarah had left behind. He was rebuilding, piece by piece. And then came Olivia. Confident, uncomplicated, a woman who didn't need to be convinced to love him, who didn't mistake recklessness for passion. Their connection wasn't hurried or desperate, it was easy, like breathing. And for the first time in years, Vincent realized that love shouldn't be a battlefield. Sarah's name never crossed his lips again. As the waves crashed against the shore, he held Olivia close, kissed her slow, and knew he was finally free. In today's world, where temptation is just a message away and work-life balance is constantly tested, the story of Sarah and Vincent is a cautionary tale. Emotional neglect creates distance, and distance invites distraction. If you value someone, nurture that connection, communicate, prioritize, and don't let unresolved frustrations turn into irreversible mistakes. Boundaries matter. What starts as innocent can spiral into betrayal if left unchecked. And if you're on the other side of heartbreak, remember, walking away isn't weakness. It's self-respect. Heal, rebuild, and never chase a love that makes you question your worth. Choose peace over chaos.